Hi, good morning. In this video tutorial, I'm gonna do a modified video on how to make a medium size rose. Although I already had a tutorial for this one, but I have this combo that I'm compiling right now, and it's a combo. It's a collection of paper flower designs that I particularly use for paper flower wall, and having this medium size rose is part of it. But the thing is, there's a difference between making a rose just to display it all by itself, and there's also a rose that would basically work so well with other flowers in your paper flower wall. At the same time, it saves you ton of papers. I mean, four sheets in every flower. So that's a big difference. Like for example, if you are going to make 10 flowers, a 10 medium size rose, then you will save like at least 40 sheets of paper. So that's a big deal, especially if paper flower wall is your business. So I'm using the same templates, but I just reduce it, like before I'm using 12 pieces of this petal one, and I'm still using 12, but I reduce the 4 pieces sheet here. So now it's 12 and 12. So how does it work? So this is a sheet of 8.5 by 11, and the way how I lay it out, if you are using PDF, just lay the template this way. But if you are using SVG, you don't really have to worry, because I lay it out this way for you to, to make it easier for you to cut. And I also provided the exact sizing that I'm using here. So with the PDF users, this is how it looks like. So you will just need to cut 12 sheets of A4 or 8.5 by 11 instead of 16. And the reason why I reduced that, because before, so you'll make 12 of this size of these petals. And before, the way how I make my rose, I make 16 of this petal 2 of medium rose template. So the way how I do it is I lay one, and this is gonna be empty, because if you are going to place the same exact petal on the other side, it's too big, and this part here would overlap each other, so it cannot be. So this part here will be wasted, and all I'm using is this one for another 4 sheets of paper. And even though I'm saving this, it's less likely that I'm gonna use it again. So basically, it's just getting wasted. So I try to make a medium-sized rose that only uses 12 of one and 12 of two, and it works very well. And to be honest, this was the kind of rose that I was using with my last paper flower wall. So let's start. It's basically the same, especially with the bud. So let's group this 12 into 3. So 4 petals in each group. 1, 2, and 3. So let's set aside the 2 parts. Let's focus on the first one. So let's start with our bud, the same as what the tutorial before. Actually, the tutorial I made before was for the large rose, and basically the method applies the same with the medium. So now that I have this one, you have the options, but I'm sure lots of ladies will be happy with this tutorial, since it will lessen the, you know, the number of sheets that they consume in each flower. So what we are trying to do here is just to make a clover leaf, which I'm just gluing this square part here perfectly to make a clover. And I have some question before, like why I did not make, because with my small roses the clover is one piece, but on larger scale like this medium, starting from the medium large to extra large, I have to make my I have to cut my clover, you know, at portions, so it will fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, or else we have to use a larger paper, and it's not the easiest, you know, thing or easiest paper to find. So what we are trying to make here, so now we have the clover, and you see this this last two petals that we made. So these are basically the first two petals that we're going to use. So let's just fold it upright, you know, to the edge of the square, so it can really create like a perfect square at the base. And let's start curling one petal at a time, like hugging it, and just securing it to make a cone. So let's do the same thing with the opposite petal, and this time one side at a time. So because it's I mean, larger petal is harder to work with, so I would suggest, especially if you are a beginner, to do one side at a time, you know, especially if you have all the time in the world. But for me, I don't have that much time, but I don't want to sacrifice the quality of my paper just because I'm in hurry, so I still try the quickest way possible, at the same time taking my time to make sure that it still really looks good. So one side, by the way, I'm using this peach recycled colored cardstock, and this is one of my favorite color aside from pink, but pink is my ultimate favorite, and rose gold. Well, basically it's still pink, but just shimmery. So now we have our innermost bud. We can then set this one aside and then proceed to our set 2 of petal 1 in our medium rose template. So basically, with our innermost bud, the way how we do it is to perfectly fit the square together. So on our second layer, let's move a little bit, you know, outward to create a gradual growth of petal from the bud outward. So let's glue that, and glue this one again. So to make it even, what I do is to lay it exactly the same, and this one too, you know, to really make sure that I have the same size as the other bone. So basically, I'm making 2 bones here, and then I'm gonna attach it together to create another clover. So, see? I think it's more even to do it this way, because I'm crafty, but I am not the most, you know, precise person. So I really have to do some tricks to make it sure that it's precise, close to precise as possible. So just dab some glue. So we have another clover, larger than our first one. Now we can sit our bud at the very middle, and we can work from there. So one side at a time again. And if you notice, I try to raise the petals on the side with the open portion here, which was the last, you know, the last 2 petals that we closed. So it will just give, you know, the kind of interval and more natural like rose. So one side at a time again. And the other side. So we're closing this part. And the last petal. So we have our second layer bud here. Basically it's growing. So now let's put our third layer. When the second layer was this much of, you know, pushing out, let's try to push it more outward. Like basically it's almost like the half of the entire square. So it's just less than a half. So as I said, you know, what we are trying to achieve here is the gradual growth. As you see, this is lower, and as we go on the outer side, it's growing. And not a crazy growth that it would look unnatural at all. So again, the same method. I'm just trying to create a bone here to ensure that, you know, all sides is equal. So I'm not gluing this part here. I'm gluing it, you know, on this area. So it's like 2 petals at a time, and then I just put it together. And eyeballing it and making it sure that every sides is the same, and then just gluing the bones together. And now I have another clover. So with the last layer of our inner bud, what we're going to do is to try curling the sides outward, because the last layer would be the start of our outer layer transition. So to make it natural, it's still gonna be a close hug into our inner bud, yet at the same time we're starting to you know, create a curl for the transition of our outer layers. So both sides outward. And I'm not sure if I mentioned it on the large rose tutorial, but to make it easier for you to have a curl on the center, what I do is, you know, to just rub my dowel rod. Although you can use whatever curler you prefer, but this is the best curler for me. See, it's a nice soft curl in the middle. All I do is just to curl my palm, getting the petal in it, and then just rub this dowel rod in it. So now we're doing the same thing. With the last petal. So all 4 petals are now curled outward, and in the middle it's curled inward. So now we can place our petal, our inner bud again in the middle. And again, just like the second layer, we're going to do this side here, since it's the side where the open portion of our bud is. So let's glue once. Actually, we can do 2 sides at a time with this one, since it's closer now to handle with my tiny hands. So that's fine, as long as you can, you know, as long as you can reach it. It's no problem if you will glue it one side at a time. The problem is when, you know, the bud is so massive that your fingers, especially mine, are not that long. So I have hard time, you know, gluing the both sides together. So the advantage of curling this side, this center here, is you don't have to worry when you put it together. Automatically this curl here looks natural. So again, we're curling the side together and try to massage those area that needs to be fixed, you know, just to make it look prettier than the first. So again, on the third petal in this last layer, and down to the fourth. So here you go. Here's our bud. Actually, I also use this one. Like, I make this particular bud and I use it for like filler. Like, there are some portion on your wall that really needs to be covered, and a larger flower is just large, very large for it. So I used buds, I used the medium, and I used the small depending on the size of the gap. So each time that I make a paper flower wall, I make sure that I have at least 10 or, you know, few that I can use. So anyway, even if you're not going to use it, you know, you can just take it home and you can just add the outer layer and then you can just sell it again. So that's how I do it. So it's really not a waste. It's just, for me, it's a smart step to do to ensure that you don't have an empty gap that you need to cover. So let's proceed to our petal 2, and the same thing with our petal 1. Let's gonna divide this into three parts or 3 layers, and set aside the 2 and let's focus on 1. So with these 4 petals together, what I'm doing is again curling it outward like so, and hold the base together and then curl your hand, and again the same thing what we did with the petal, the outer part of the bud. Just glide this dowel rod or whatever curler you have, and that's the thing about this dowel rod, because it's firm enough to hold, you know, this much, like 4 sheets at a time. So if the 3rd layer is the transition for our 2nd petal, this 1st layer also is the transition area of our bud. So we are not going to go very far to make it look more natural. Let's go a little bit closer, which is here in this part. Anyway, the petal itself is large enough, so it's not gonna be crazy wide. And if you are, although you can move it a little bit, yes you can, and it won't look very bad, but I would recommend, you know, for the transition, we would minimize the gap of the petal, you know, from the previous one. So the way how I glue it, I just make like a T here. So I sit it on the edge of the T and set my bud on my petal. So it ensures that this part here is glue to the base. At the same time, this area also is glue on the bud, on the corner of the bud, and then just massage it a little bit, and then you can glue the sides. And now, because the sides is getting larger, I'm going back to one side at a time, you know, of gluing it. And the design of the petal itself, this like little ear here, earlobe here, it's very helpful on making it sure that you have an easier way to glue the sides together. Oops, I think I let go of it, you know, prematurely. So sometimes you gotta have to hold it for a good number of seconds before letting it go. So we're going to proceed to our second petal. I'm just eyeballing, but at the same time I'm trying to make it sure that I, you know, put the glue at the right and same distance as the previous one. And again, the way how I do it, you see this corner here, like we have corners like a square of our base. I place it in the middle of the base of, you know, my first layer of petal 2. So it's like when you place the petal here, it's in between the previous petal on your bud. So that would create a very good layering on your flower. So again, hold a good number of seconds before letting it go. And same thing with the other. So, to our third petal. And again, I'm just eyeballing it, but making it sure that it's the same distance as the other two. And to our fourth one. After you master this stage, I know, you know, making a rose is really tedious and very time consuming, but as long as you master this step and trick, it becomes, you know, much easier. So we're successful with our transition petals, and we're going to proceed now to our second layer. And I cannot stress enough how important this second layer is, because this is gonna be the layer on, you know, where you can really achieve the size that you want. Although the difference of the size of the 16 petals or 16 sheets to the 12 sheets is very minimal, like just 1 inch or 1.5 inch. And if you're going to save like 4 sheets of paper just for that size, I really don't mind decreasing the size of my rose, because, you know, basically if you're going to put a lot of it, it's really gonna compensate the size. Plus we have more other petals also that would help filling up the wall. And to be honest, no one would measure your flower if it, you know, it's in the exact size when it comes to the wall. So as I said, I cannot stress enough that this is the layer that you will be very mindful, because this is the one that would create the size that you want. So when earlier we are putting like a T here, wait, let me put some glue, because I think I'm out of glue. If earlier we made a T, in this stage we're only using, you know, a strip at the edge of our base, and basically I'm just sitting my petal at the very edge of the corner here. So basically this is the one that really creating the size, this layer. So again, one side or maybe two if you can reach it, but if you don't, you know, better stick to one side at a time. So if you're comfortable doing the two, then go ahead. So you see, our petal is growing. And let's do the same thing again. Just sit it at the very edge of your bud, like so. And then just glue the sides. Excuse me. And now let's move on to our third petal. And just trying to glue the sides. One thing I love most about this paper color is, as you know, the petal get dense, the flower or the color really intensifies, and as it gets loosened, the color really becomes softer. So I know it doesn't really look like a rose right now, but let's work on that. So we're down to our last petal of this layer, and make sure that the base is secure. So this is very important, to make sure that you really can play around with your petal, because if your base is unsecure, there's no way that you really can pull and glue it over. So as you can see, we have our second layer. It does looks like a flower, but not very much like a rose. As you can see, it looks like a square. And that's where our third layer will play the role. If the second layer of our petal 2 is crucial in creating the size, the third layer is crucial to make sure that we will gonna make, you know, a rounded shape rose. So the same thing again, we're curling the sides outward. So by the way, I know this is time consuming, and you would say, why would I include this one if this is time consuming? At first, yes, but as I said, when you master it, it becomes easier. Plus, you know, when you are aiming to make like a really nice and soft and elegant texture in your flower wall, having a rose is really necessary. So even if in the entire wall you would just make 10 pieces of this one, it would certainly do. Like the texture would really stand out. So to our first petal, so the way how we do it earlier was we place glue, on the second layer, we place glue at the tip, and that's the same thing that we're gonna do this time. And before, we are sitting it at the edge, so it would look like this if we're going to do the same. But what we are trying to do right now is trying to make sure that we will have a rounded rose instead of this square-like. So instead of sitting it at the edge, what we're going to do is to sit it in a way that, you know, it's not very far. The transition would not be very far from this two here. So might be like this one. So it doesn't really matter how although it matters that it's secure here, but it doesn't matter how your base would look like, how the placement of your base of your petal looks like. The most important thing is you eyeball it first, like so, before sitting it. And sitting it would push the petal towards the base, push the bud or your entire flower to your base of your petal, and it's gonna glue it together. So after that, we can then now glue the sides. Compared to sitting it at the very edge, you see, it would create the same thing as this one. So the third layer basically is the stopping point and the rounded, you know, the layer that would make your rose rounded. So what we're going to do is I'm making a little T, but a shorter T. And as I said, I'm not very much concerned of where my base is on the bottom of my rose. My concern is my petal really aligns with the previous one. So it's really not that bad at the bottom, and at the same time it's really good with, you know, it really coordinates with these two here. And if this one, we really made it sure that we are placing it like a little bit away from this layer. Now we make it sure that it will, you know, it will be attached closer to the previous two layers, like so. So because it's flatter, then again it's now becoming wider, and my tiny fingers cannot reach all the way out, you know, comfortably. So I'm doing one petal at a time again. So you see, now you can, you know, visually tell that it's rounded, the illusion of, you know, the rounded flower compared to the square one. So let's go ahead and do the second and fourth. And again, I'm just eyeballing. I'm more concerned of how my petal look on the surface compared to how my base look. But I also ensure that my base is glued very well at the bottom. So one side at a time for me this time, because it's flatter and it's getting wider. And down to my two remaining petals. And sitting it to stick the glue on the base, and again just gluing the sides. So down to our last one. Gluing the sides together. So that's it. Here's our, let's see how big that rose is. So this one is 15, but the 16 sheets would be 16. So like an inch difference. I really don't think I would sacrifice 4 sheets of paper just for an inch difference. So basically this is, you know, the way to go if you wanted to have rose on your arrangement, but at the same time you don't want to consume a lot of flowers in it. And basically when you want to preserve your flowers after your event, and what I am gonna do is I'm going to glue like a base here, just in case, you know, I'm putting hot glue here or whatever glue I'm gonna use to stick this on my wall. So if you will rip it off, the integrity of your flower is still intact. You only damage the base, which basically you can replace anytime. So I think, no, it's too big. Yeah, that's fine. So basically I'm just putting a base here, and it would really help. This is like a poster board, by the way, that I got from the dollar store. So when doing my base, that's my way to go. But if you are going to, this is not bad at all, isn't it right? This is not bad at all, you know, to stand out by itself, but this is really more applicable for like paper flower wall. But if you want a fuller rose, you can still do the 16 petal of the outer of the petal too, so it becomes, you know, much fuller, and you can follow the tutorial I made for the large rose, which basically applies the same method. But if you're going to use this one with like hanging by itself, or hanging with just few other groups of flowers, and you're not using it for a wall, of course we're gonna need to put some hanger on it, so it's gonna be easier for us to hang it. Or if you're selling it, it's gonna be easier for your client to hang the flowers that you sold to them. So just trying to make sure I give a decent amount of glue and gluing it around the base. So what this base does basically is not just to have a base to, you know, keep the integrity of our flower when we're using it to a paper flower wall, but it also covers the imperfection at the back of our flower. So now we can easily hang this one with whatever into our wall. So here you go. This is our medium-sized rose, which is 15 inches wide, only using 12 sheets of paper. So I hope you guys like this tutorial, and if you do, please gives me a thumbs up. And I am giving away, or I am posting, you know, every now and then free tutorial, which means it's public and you can view it, you know, you can just view it anytime you want. So you have to subscribe to my YouTube channel, so you'll get updated whenever I posted a public video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for your support. Bye.